this go? This doesn't go in there. I don't know.
Okay, back to the slide.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear us.
And see us?
Yes, you're on. I just got an approval. We're on. So we'll get right to it. Since we had a little technical difficulties, the computer decided to crash right when we launched the show to log in. I'm Mike Freshour from the Cass County Fair.
I'm Ken Kiespert from the Berrien County Fair.
And we're going to be talking about high-tech fairgrounds. And we're going to mix it up a little bit. If those people have watched the presentation in the past, we're going to focus on a couple areas that we think that it should be highlighted this year just because of the technology and it's always changing. So if we go to the slide, we're going to talk about what really consists of what we think is a high-tech fairground.
So as you see on the slide in the bullet points here, an IP network, Wi-Fi, fiber optic cabling, phones, emergency paging, network audio, card access, security, point of sale, and digital signage. Most people think of fairgrounds just paging systems and speakers and making things like that. Well, almost anymore, networking becomes another more important item on our network in our fairgrounds, I guess.
Yep. And we're going to go right into talk about networking. And with a lot of the stuff you see here, if we go back to the camera, this is an audio processor that controls audio on fairgrounds, speaker, and paging. A lot of these things are based on and can be connected with a good network. So you have to start with a good IP network, computer network, Wi-Fi, and to get all these items working together, even send audio through network now is becoming very popular. If you have places where you need audio and you have a good network, you can get audio there relatively painlessly. So we're going to go to the next slide here. And as far as the IP network, Ken?
These are just a kind of a picture of various parts. The top one there is the router. That's your main device that would connect between your service provider, whether that be a cable modem or a phone line or whatever, to your main system. The next one down is a fiber switch. So this becomes your hub in your main closet somewhere of fiber distribution out to the fairgrounds, to various barns or buildings or whatnot. And then in each of those buildings, you'd have some type of network switch. That one is a very large one. That's 48 ports. In our fairgrounds, we have a lot of 8-port ones in some places. We have 16 ports in places, scattered all about the fairgrounds on our fiber network. The bottom two devices are controllers, which basically is your magic box that can manage the whole network.
Yep. Go back to camera if you could. And one thing about this particular brand that we're using, we found to be very cost effective and reliable for our fairgrounds. There's obviously many choices. But like I said, if you've said in other sessions of ours, we use Ubiquity. And for the bang for the buck, if you will, you get really good quality, some of the higher end enterprise features, if you will, and just really good reliability. We've had pretty good luck with everything over the years with those. And even some of the stuff being outside all the time. I have a rack in my grandstand that's not heated in the under portion of it, and it just works. It runs without too much trouble. So next slide is talking about Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is an extension of your network, and a lot of fairgrounds are doing Wi-Fi. There are portable solutions. You can have somebody come in and put some portable rigs up. But as far as ground rules for Wi-Fi, Ken?
So there's a lot of different ways of doing Wi-Fi on the Berrien County Fairgrounds. We use a voucher system. So we charge $1 to use our Wi-Fi. So it does a couple different things. It controls the number of users on the Wi-Fi so we don't overload it, so to speak. It also becomes a slight bit of a revenue stream to help augment, for the most part, it pays for our bandwidth. It really doesn't pay for the hardware, but it pays for the bandwidth for the week of the fair. So 30 to 50 users on an access point is a good rule of thumb. We have 40 access points, I think, on the fairgrounds now, in all over the populated areas. In every building, there's at least 2. And it's not an open system. Like I say, that you log into it and it asks for a code. You pick up the card at any of the various offices around and hit your code, and you're good to go for the week. And when we have private shows there, we could open it up. Like if there's a small show that they don't want to do that, they have 50 people on the grounds or whatever, you're renting a building out, we could turn the Wi-Fi on and off, make it be open, and things like that.
And furthermore, if you want to, like on the Cass Fairgrounds, we don't charge for ours, but it is not open and free. You still have to come to the office and get a voucher. So again, it's a way to control and able to kind of keep things in check. So you, like he said, don't overload things. But that's your choice. You guys can decide whatever you want to do on your fairgrounds. And we do recommend, regardless of what you do, is you use commercial equipment. Like I said, we use Ubiquity, which branches over to the home consumer side of things a little bit, but Ubiquity has a full line of outdoor access points. And there's also Cisco and Aruba and a few others. If you have a partner that you work with at your fairgrounds that could recommend certain things, get with that partner and they can help you out with that kind of stuff. And this slide is some of the access points we use. Again, this is Ubiquity. Depending on what you're doing, some of them have more capabilities, more capacity. And this is just a setup of one of my points. And in this particular application, I am feeding this node, if you will, wirelessly. So there's no way I could get a wire out there. So I'm sending wireless, and I'm still getting 300 to 400 meg over the wireless link. And then that square box below that little antenna is the access point for that area, and it's back in a campground, so a bunch of campers can get on this particular link. Now, I just ran fiber this last year since we had some downtime, and we'll discuss that too. And we'll get into fiber optics.
So fiber cabling has become a lot less expensive, more cost-effective these days, and the length limitations is the biggest problem. With copper, your 300 foot is basically the rule. So typically we have a lot of 200-foot buildings, so 300 feet of copper doesn't go very far. So bringing copper to a termination point where you hook up to your fiber is pretty much going to happen for the most part. We've spread our fiber optic nodes out, so we can service multiple buildings off of one fiber node. Being it's glass, that's lightning immune to lightning, so to speak. And what's showing here, the small cabinet there on the upper right, is basically a small fiber terminal cabinet. Fiber comes in, fiber goes out on some terminals. In the bottom is actually a rack mount enclosure that would be typically in a rack in a closet somewhere or a box located somewhere in a building to bring the fiber in and terminate it.
Yep. And this is a couple pictures of some equipment that I installed last year. It may be hard to see. The left-hand side is just a metal enclosure that I get from a local electrical supplier. And we built an H-frame next to a phone pole where the fiber comes over, and you can see the 2 fiber runs. I ran fiber all down the lateral run of my fairgrounds, clear to the back corners and around to some camping areas last year. And we got a spool of fiber from a vendor that does municipalities, where they go around cities with it. And their ends of rolls are 2,000, 3,000 feet, when they're doing miles and miles of it. So you can pick that stuff up for pennies on the dollar. I think we got it for 20-something cents a foot or less. We went and picked it up. The picture on the right, I just tied it up with the gear up on the phone pole, ran a piece of conduit down to protect it a little bit, and those 2 loops there are the fiber. And I came down into this box. That's 96 strands, and inside this box, which I don't have a picture of, there's a small patch panel similar to what you see here, a smaller version on this slide, that I broke out a handful of fibers. So if I need to feed a building close to me right there, or I need to go up and put an access point or put some electronics in, I have a place to do that. And then I have like 5 or 6 of these throughout the fairgrounds, what I call splice points, that I made the splice in that metal box so I can patch in something if I need to down the line.
So once you have a fiber infrastructure, a good solid network on your fairgrounds, and more it's going to go to far and far corners of the fairgrounds, as Mike said. Telephone is another piece. A lot of our fairgrounds, we still have analog phones. Some have some digital phones. You may have phones in your offices. On the Berrien County Fairgrounds, we have standard analog phones in all of our ticket booths where people drive in. When people drive into our fairgrounds, that's where we collect our money at. So every one of those booths have phones, so they can call back to the office to request, whether they need assistance, they need more money, whatever they may need. There's a phone in every one of the booths. We bring those back. On some of it's on copper, some's on fiber. But in the office itself, using VoIP phones, we can put a phone anywhere on the fairgrounds, whether it be for a remote office in a maintenance building, or wherever for special events and things like that. So you could literally plug a phone into any network jack.
And this last year, during last year's fair, where we were able to actually have a fair, year before.
Yeah.
I had network put into my booths because we did POS systems, so I needed network out at each drive-up booth for the POS system, and I also put a phone in each booth as well, and it was on the network. We have a VoIP system, like in the previous picture. I use equipment by a company called Grandstream, and again, Ubiquity now has a VoIP option that's kind of all consolidated in their package that you could look into, but there are many VoIP and phone service providers, and I mentioned before I use Callcentric, and my phone bill went from hundreds of dollars a month to literally 20 to 30 even during call peak times for the fair. And knock on wood, it's all still running very good.
Well, paging is probably where everybody that's attending this started out. The basic needs of a fairgrounds is a microphone, to some speakers, to be able to get the word out, talk about things, announce things. More traditionally, in a arena area that you're going to talk to the patrons. In a horse area, you're going to be talking to the show people who are showing their horses, or you're going to be paging into the barns to let them know what class is next up in the arena. The pole here is just a light pole with some big horns on it, a small one on the back side, a big one on the front side. Pretty typical of most of our fairgrounds installations. There's very traditional 70-volt amplifiers, which is pretty much what we all use. We've now changed to a zone-based system for the most part. The rack that you see on the camera here is pretty typical of a small system. We have racks of amplifiers in our horse area, in grandstands, show arenas, and we have all those connected over the fiber optic network, so we can actually route audio very easily from a given microphone to the various barns, whether that be a horse barn or a show arena or things like that. So as Mike a little bit pointed out earlier, on this particular rack, the bottom unit here is the interface that goes to the network audio. The next device up is really a mixer, but this mixer has no knobs. So it has multiple inputs and multiple outputs, which can be controlled by these control panels right here or on an iPad. And so the iPad itself, you can have your own various graphics, whether it be buttons or sliders or volume knobs or whatever. So in our horse area, in our show arena area, our maintenance person and whatnot, they just grab the iPad. Okay, we want announce booth A to talk to these barns. We need announce booth B to talk to these barns. And we just select which barns. Every barn has an individual output on our system. And so they're all tied together on our fiber system.
Yep, and one thing here too, as we were talking about network audio, in this case, this box talks to the network, But in a pinch, like I said, if you need to get audio and you have a good network in place, you need to get audio to a particular place where you're doing something special this year for whatever reason, or if somebody's running the campgrounds and it's like, you know what, we're going to have everybody gathered down at this end and we need a paging microphone. These little boxes basically network in, XLR 3-pin microphone style connector out. So you have an in and an out. You just plug these into your network. There's some software on the backside. You log in and you set it up. And once they're set up, if your network's good, you plug them in and audio shows up. You plug this into a little mixer wherever you're setting up. This comes out, goes into your amplifier. And now I have audio in the far reaches where I didn't have it before, and I don't have to run a whole bunch of extra cable if I have a good network there. And we've done this over wireless to some extent.
A little bit.
Bit.
A wireless bridge.
These have multiple channels of audio capable, so you can have multiple mics or a mic and a line, an iPod, a music source of some kind. But and it's really network bandwidth dependent. So, but for most of our applications, even a Wi-Fi network,
channels,
a couple channels will handle what we need to do. So.
Yeah, we had a corporate company rent our fairgrounds a couple years ago for their corporate picnic. It was a new client, and they were pretty technical savvy. They had a lot of their own gear, a lot of their own speaker systems, because they were used to going to a park. And they came to the fairgrounds because the park actually was flooded, so they couldn't go to the park anymore. So we had a meeting with them where how they were going to utilize our fairgrounds. And we're going to set up a big tent here. We need sound here. Our main announcer is going to be here. And we'll just string some wires from here to here. I said, well, what do you need? Well, we need to get the audio from the main announce area way over to this other tent, which was probably a good 1,000, 2,000 feet, which they would have to string all that wire if they wanted to. I said, well, no problem. I got network over there. I'll just plug in a couple of these dongles, and literally, in 5 minutes, I had their audio connected from point A to point B, 1,000 feet, 1,000 feet away, 3 roads and 1,000 feet away on the fairground. So, but we already had the infrastructure in place. It's just a matter of plugging into a jack and like Mike said, going to the laptop and say, the devices show up on the software. You say, I want this one to talk to this one, and you're done. So it was a virtual wire at that point.
Mm-hmm. Another box here that's on our counter is what we use a lot in our show arena and our horse arena areas. And this little box sits right next to the announcer, and it gives them some flexibility on what goes out. And in this particular box, I don't know if you switch to the other camera, you can kind of see it has class, ring, and iPod. So I have a little cable here plugged into my phone, so I can play music, flip switch up, music will come out of the system wherever I have it routed to. Has a microphone connection, so you plug a mic in for the announcer sitting at the table. You can send that microphone to the ring, or you can send it to what we call class call. However you have it patched, it could be a barn, it could be speakers on the backside of things that you normally wouldn't send normal audio to. But, and this plugs into the particular system we have with one network cable, and all the signals go down, and it kind of cleans things up on the counter. You don't have to have a mixer and this and that. It's just the box, a microphone, and whatever device you have. And that's something that Ken designed and put together himself, and it kind of works. But they have keypads now like this, which all run over the network. So if you just need basic control at your announcer stand, you could put this in a little box that sits on the counter, plug it into your network, and now you're controlling the sound system that way if you need to control throughout the event. A lot of times, if you're doing a horse show or something, you'll set the mic levels and you don't have to mess with it. And that way this could be in a rack somewhere closed off and you don't have to mess with it. So, but there are options. And this particular equipment is made by BSS Audio, which is all part of Harman, Crown Amplifiers, BSS, Soundcraft. It's all part of the same group now. And it all works together. It's a little bit involved to program up the system originally. That's why we recommend getting with a local contractor, an AV guy who is familiar with network processors and stuff. That way they can put together a simple program. It doesn't have to be difficult. Some ins and some outs and some routing, and you can have a nice control for your horse or grounds paging or something like that.
And once you're into the digital audio, I'm sure all of us have gone through the various ways of patching speakers and patching barns and making this barn come out of here and this barn come out of here, and these go everywhere. So now, once everything is hanging on the network, yes, you're relying on your network, but there's where it goes back to the slide number 1 of having a reliable network. But now anything is routable anywhere. So you want to have music playing at fairgrounds, you want to have the main page mic in the main office that usually only goes, to the grounds paging, let's say, but you have an emergency and it needs to go to the horse area, it needs to go to another barn, you just hit a button. And the flexibility is there, especially for all the rentals too.
Yep, and the next slide is what we touched on. Part of the audio system is network audio, and a term that you may or may not have heard of in the professional audio world is called Dante, and it is the networked audio protocol of choice now. There was a few that kind of popped up years ago, but Dante appears to be the prevalent one now, and a lot of manufacturers are putting that on their equipment natively. So depending on what processor you go with, what audio processor you go with, or even some switch boxes now and some gear, even amplifiers, have Dante built in. So it's just one network line between the gear, and you set it up with the software, and it all goes through digitally, and it's pretty robust and reliable. How many channels on a good Dante link could you run?
64.
64 channels.
Or more. So.
And a lot of, if you do big concerts, the guy sitting at the front of the house behind his big mixer to the stage, a lot of that is Dante now. It's a couple network lines, and it all goes through the network. So that's, again, we preface this on a good network. The possibilities are pretty much endless.
And basically, he was mentioning that they're native to a lot of equipment, and there's drivers for a laptop. So you have a computer, and you can load the software on your computer. It could be the computer you're doing management with. It could sit in the office somewhere. I run a computer in our tech office, and I run Pandora on it. When I'm there working on the fairgrounds, I could pump music out on the Dante network and pick it up in any of our racks just by pushing a button. Of course, legally, you have to be careful playing music on your paging system. When the public is there, you have to pay for license rights, but that's a whole different problem that we're not going to talk about here. But the transport of that music is right there on the network and just easy to do. So it works out pretty darn easy.
No, music or a microphone.
Or everything, anything.
Whatever, right. So.
Go back to the slides here, and we'll go back to our so we pretty much covered all that. Card access. Well, now you have buildings, and all of us have probably a key ring that's way too big for our fairgrounds, because over 100 years of the buildings being around, you just keep getting new locks.
This one isn't so bad, but I know our maintenance guy, I'm surprised he doesn't have...
Is he the jail keeper with the big ring?
Yeah, and he's got to have reinforced belt loops because the keys keep pulling his belt loop off.
So card access is obviously becoming, it's pretty standard in a lot of commercial buildings these days. You have your badge, you have your little dongle, your fob that you wave on the thing and it unlocks the door and lets you in. It can run gates or run doors. The cool thing about it is you can control what that card does. So if you have you have a lot of rentals, and now they want to come in at a weird hour, and you're not going to have a tech person there, you're not going to have a maintenance person there. Okay, here's your card. You can set up the schedule when that card can work, and they only have access to the building that they're allowed to be in. Now there's some, again, added cost to this, but now now we have the network. Now you just add these boxes to it, and it's 100% scalable.
And the box in this picture here will handle 4 doors. You can get ones that'll handle more. You can get ones that'll handle a single door. So if you have an outbuilding where you just need a single door, you can put one of these boxes on it. And it has to be locally powered, but You could put one in an outbuilding somewhere where you need a maintenance building, for example, to control a door. As long as it's locally powered, you can even hook a Wi-Fi link up and get the communication to it wirelessly, so you don't have to run any wires clear out there. And it stores all the information locally internal to the box. So once you push out an update with credentials for people to come and go, it stores them locally. So even if the network goes down, the last push out, all those credentials will be in the system. So if I push out saying I have a group coming in and I give them a couple cards and I send it out on Friday, the network goes down Saturday and they come in on Sunday, they're still going to be able to get in and out because the network is not, unless you want real-time visible control and viewing, a log, if you will, of who's coming and going, it's not required all the time. So you could, in theory, take a laptop out there, update the software, push out new credentials, and it's just going to work.
And you touched briefly on logs. The cool thing is, it is monitoring your card and the card numbers, every in and every out. So should there be something that comes up that you need to know who got in the building at what time, you can go back to the log file and go, card number 47, which is Mike's card, why was he in that building? That doesn't matter.
Because that's where they keep the chocolate.
The chocolate, got it.
Obviously, I like chocolate, so it's, anybody who knows me, I'm an Albanese nut. So back to this slide, and there's obviously different versions of card readers that can be mounted to poles or buildings or whatever, but the one on the left here, the Geovision that has the camera, that one I have at my gate, and we have an electric slide gate that we put in years ago, and that actually has it's multiple items in one. It is a camera, so it can hang on your surveillance network and show up on a monitor like any surveillance IP camera, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But it also is a proximity reader for a card, so you can hold your card up to it and it triggers something to do something. And it also is, we talked about VoIP and phones, it is a VoIP, what they call a VoIP endpoint. So you can program this to talk to your phone system. So if Brenda is in our office, somebody comes up, they can hit that little ringer button and it'll ring her phone. And if she's busy or is not at her desk, it'll ring the phones in the office. She can answer it, and then she can go over and look at the monitor and say, oh yeah, somebody's at the end. They say, I'm here to take care of some business or whatever. She can hit a code on her phone and it'll trigger the slide gate. So that's an access controller, a VoIP phone, and a camera all in one box. And it works great for gates. And this is just a little setup of what's in my office. You have the controllers up there, you have a couple batteries. The big box to the left is an external power supply. Because I've got multiple doors, so I needed a little more power than what the controllers will do themselves natively out of the box. And then on the right is just an example of the logs and the software that you can kind of at a glance see once you put it in the software, see who's coming, going, when they were here, and all that.
Surveillance. Well, everybody has a camera these days. Every day you turn on the news that someone's Ring doorbell has captured someone stealing Christmas presents or whatever. Good, bad, or indifferent, we live with them every day, and unfortunately, it's kind of become a norm. So, monitoring our gates, monitoring key areas of the building is getting more and more, price-wise affordable. So, on the Barron County Fairgrounds, we do not have very many cameras right now, but we certainly have added a few here and there to monitor some key areas. But again, they just hop right on your network. So once you got that backbone, adding all these other pieces of technology are just really easy.
One thing that when we talked about network earlier, we talked about network switches, the things that go in the rack that all this stuff plugs into. These switches now provide power to devices. So if you have a phone plugged into the network, you don't have to have another wall wart power cord plugged into the wall and then your network cable plugged into the network jack. It's called power over Ethernet, and it provides power to devices. Now there are different flavors of power over Ethernet. You have to look at the device you're trying to power and make sure your switch is capable of powering that device. And there's AT, AF, and it's an alphabet soup of different versions. But as long as you look at the device, most of the switches that you get now will do that. Like one of the reasons we picked Ubiquiti is the nicer switches from Ubiquiti, you can select the type of power. A lot of Ubiquiti devices have two different versions of PoE, and in the switch port, for every port, if I have this device plugged in here, I can select what type of power it requires and select it right in the switch, and it'll power it. So like the cameras, there's several different versions of power over Ethernet. Most of them are compatible with any switch, but just something to look for when you're picking out a system for your fairgrounds. And this one is Geovision. And again, it's one of those, we like to pick out companies that give us pretty good bang for the buck as far as features and reliability and price. And of course, you may have heard the term Axis, and there's a few other manufacturers. There's literally hundreds of manufacturers of cameras. Some you can get cheap on Amazon, but Geovision is, I've had cameras outside for 5 or 6 years now, and they just work. If the network goes down, obviously you lose something. You may not be able to view them from the outside, but the internal network, it's still recording to, I'll go to the next slide here, the server or the device that does the recording.
And you can have access, this is a couple dedicated server, which is a big computer, or just an appliance, which just sits on a shelf that can handle, 16 cameras in this particular case, depending what you're doing. You could have multiple servers, depending how you're doing things, but if you're entirely wired, you're all in good shape. These servers, you can remote into these from the outside world to view and things like that, should you need to look at go back to look at the footage, so to speak, for, if something happened. But Mike mentioned Geovision. We have a local computer shop that, again, we try to support local small business, and they're our go-to. So, we have an account with them, and they stock the stuff. They know it. They can become our tech support, and we buy stuff.
We just did a big install of 60-something cameras at a local school, church, and he was able to help me out remotely, log in and deal with some issues that we were having. But as far as the devices, it just depends on how many cameras that you want. We are using, personally, I'm using a donated computer. We have a good friend of the fairgrounds that works in technology, that they upgraded at their facility all the computers, and they pulled the hard drives out, so we had to provide a hard drive. But we got a bunch of donated computers that they've changed their computers every 3 to 5 years. Even a 5-year-old computer with a good core processor, you put a new hard drive in, will work fine. And I'm using probably at this date, it's probably now a 9-year-old computer with a core Intel processor. I put a couple surveillance drives in it that are really made to run all the time. And I've got a dozen cameras on it, and it works just fine. Now, the computer was free. I probably have a couple $100 in drives and some extra stuff on it. And of course, the price of the camera and the surrounding network, but the computer itself works pretty good for that, and didn't cost me much of anything. And I have it hooked to the network so I can view it with their software from the outside. And I don't know, I think again, knock on wood, it's been pretty reliable, and the software is free for up to 32 cameras, so you don't have to buy software for the server to record up to 32. Now, if you go over that, there's licensing required, and normally they're not thousands of dollars. You're talking couple $100 for a license to get another batch of cameras on the server. But keep in mind, the more cameras you add, the more hard drives you're going to want, and deal with a local vendor if you have questions on the proper amount of storage and all that for your system. Anything else on the surveillance?
Surveillance pretty good. Yeah. Go back to the slides here. We've got a few more things to go yet. Point of sale. Mike briefly said POS systems, more and more coming alive in our offices. We went to a full-blown point-of-sale system a couple years back. We have several terminals that we own, and then we rent terminals during the fair week. So we have network connections at all of our gates. So we have the small terminals, and just real easy way to take care, everything. All of our management now for gates is all electronic. So whether it be cash or credit card, it's all electronic on the point of sale system. So, we know exactly how many, whether it be discount tickets or full price tickets or kid tickets or whatever.
Well, that depends on if your volunteer help at the gate
Pushes the right button?
actually pushes the button.
That's true.
But that's a discussion for another day. But we went to this particular case, Clover, last year or year before when we had a fair, and again, the first year was a learning curve. But you set up the screens with exactly what you're doing for the day, and it may be something you log into in the morning, do a couple quick changes, and it pushes it out to all the terminals. So that day you only see your normal admission, your discount, if there's a senior admission that day or a special, and it pulls up on the report. You give it to the back office people, and they take care of the numbers. And a lot of times it matches. A lot of times it doesn't, but
That's the back office to take care of it.
yeah.
As long as the technology works, all good.
No, but she comes out of the back office and grabs me by my ear and goes, "This isn't looking right." So then we deal with it.
We are almost out of time.
Yes, we are.
Wow,
So
time flies.
let's go briefly touch on digital signage.
Digital signage can be anything you can think of, whether this be a marquee sign on the end of your road in front of your fairgrounds, is a big LED thing. It could be a 40-inch TV that someone donated you can hang in your office.
Which I have.
It could be very simple. It could be a computer with PowerPoint on it, just sitting there running a slideshow. There's lots of appliances. Bright Sign is one that makes a player that you put on the network. Novastar makes some players. We're looking at doing a sign on our roadside, big LED sign. Hopefully, eventually, we're going to put one up. But we had another sign donated to us, which is an older LED sign that we have on our trailer. And we're kind of like using it as a flexible, kind of a portable sign. You drag it somewhere, you can load some signage into it.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing, it can be managed on the network and the Wi-Fi. So that's pretty quick digital signage here. We're down to the end. Thank you very much. We could do some Q&A here. So anybody have any questions?
We have one question online. Amanda asked, any thoughts on cashless RFID technology on the fairgrounds in 2021?
Good question.
Cashless on the fairgrounds. Boy, that's going to it'd be easy on the front end as far as people paying, whether it be, Apple Pay or various other digital methods coming into the fairgrounds.
Or you buy a blanket tag that's loaded up with money.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, the concessionaires is going to be the problem piece there. So.
Depending on how you have your fare, logistically, it would take a coordinated effort between your concessionaires, your ride people, and all that. We've talked about it. We've looked at it, and for our grandstand admission, we use e-tics, and we've definitely been talking and kicking around the idea of doing a fully encompassed, some wristband, tag, something that would do just that. But we haven't worked the bugs out yet. But it is something we're definitely talking about. I went to Florida last year, and we went to a seafood fest, and it was all cashless. You got tickets. You went up to the kiosk of machines, you put your money in or your card, and you got tickets. And you paid for items with your tickets, and they worked out the deal on the back end, which is something that we probably should consider because it's very convenient.
You have the various fare debit card that you get issued, and you just load it with money.
Yeah, yep.
And when the kids run out of money, they go back to mom and
And
dad and ask for more money.
we definitely want it to be easy for them to donate their money to the fair. So, and that's why we went. One of the reasons we went to the POS is so we could take cards at the gate, because if they have $100 in their pocket in their wallet, maybe the thought is they'll use the credit card at the gate and they're going to spend every ounce of that $100 inside. Or if they had to use 30 of it to get in, and they only had 70 or 80 inside, and they needed that, the kid wanted that last little corn dog or elephant ear on the way out. It's like, I'm a couple bucks short, I'm not going to worry about it. But if they had that full 100, the theory is that they would spend it inside. And in our fairgrounds, the jury's still out on those details yet, but we like that. And we also have an ATM machine, which...
Yeah, we didn't talk about ATMs.
We
Yeah,
didn't
we
talk
have
about
several ATMs that we own.
that are on the network. Again,
They're on the
a
network.
lot of this boils down to a good network. So that's where we stand there.
Network, infrastructure. More is better.
Yep.
Is there any other questions out there?
Okay.
I think let's see if we look at the chat. Bruce Dahl makes a good point. He says make sure to check with the ordinances in your area. There could be some limitations, and he's exactly right. I guess before you start looking at digital signs and whatnot,
Right.
You do want to check with your local government and make sure that you're in compliance with their ordinances, right?
That is actually very correct, because we deal with a friend of the fairs, and a friend of ours works with banks, and they were doing a branch in a particular municipality, and they said, even though there's 2 other businesses on the same stretch that have big LED signs, they said,
No, you can't have one.
you can't have one because it's getting too cluttered. And they were going to fight them hard on this, and so they ended up not putting the moving sign out there. They just put a very big static sign, but definitely something to check out depending on where you're going to put it and how close to the road it can go, and some other variables that you may need to check out ahead of time.
Great presentation, guys.
Rough, little bumpy start, but sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad for the first time, right?
Yep,
I,
yep.
You know, just give Lisa a lot of credit for pulling this together. I told her this morning that she's the one that certainly can turn lemons into lemonade, right?
Yep.
We're all reinventing what we do every day.
And we are keeping our fingers crossed and knocking on wood that
We're gonna have fairs this
we're
year.
going to have fairs and events this year.
Exactly. And I think that based on your presentation, I think that we're going to take a road trip from the UP and come down and see what you have going on.
Hey, we would be glad to take you on a tour.
Anytime. And if we're able to have dinner in a restaurant, we will be happy to buy you dinner.
That sounds good.
Thank you very much.